screen. Yeah, you're right. You're totally right. Enterprise share screen. All right. Okay, so hello everyone listening to the YouTube tutorial. I forgot to record the first like 2 minutes of this, but basically we're on chapter 3, day 1, and this is learning Cadence. So Cadence is the smart contract language for the Flow blockchain, and we're learning this because inside of our dApp, we're making it decentralized. That's the decentralized part of our dApp. Um, and if we want to deploy a contract, we want to run a transaction or run a script from a contract, right, and hook up our dApp to the blockchain, we need to know Cadence in order to do that. So chapter 3 is really all about Cadence. Okay, so what we've done so far is in chapter 3, day 1, we've opened up the Flow Playground. And the Flow Playground is basically a place where you can code in Cadence. Now, this is all on what's called a local emulator. So none of this is real. This is all fake. If we were to do things in here, it's not going to impact the blockchain. It's just for us to start testing some basic stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this. Actually, I'll keep this for a second just to explain what smart contracts are. So basically what's going on is inside this playground, we have a bunch of accounts here, 1 through 5, and each account can have a contract in it. Now, in the real world, each account can have any number of contracts in it, but on the Flow Playground, it's only 1 per account for some reason. But just know that in the real world, you can have as many contracts as you want per account. But anyways, each account here has also an address associated with it. So for example, this is account 0x01. This is account 0x02. Now again, in the real world, the address would look something like this. It would look something like 0x921, like a long address like this. In fact, I think this is the address for the Flowvitar smart contracts. But in the playground, it's a lot shorter just so that you can read it easier and you can refer to things easier. So yeah, so that's an address, okay? Now, inside of account 1, which is what we're looking at right now, we have a smart contract. Now, it looks a little complicated because there's so many comments everywhere, but if we actually delete all the comments, you'll notice it's not too bad at all. Um, so I'm going to reorganize this a little bit and make it look a little bit nicer. If you've learned Cadence before, then you're probably going to understand why I'm doing this. It just looks better. Okay, so this is about as simple of a contract as you can get. What this is a hello world contract, right? That has a greeting variable inside of it. So this is a string type, right? We can store any string we want inside of it. And we also have this little hello function that simply just returns the greeting that we have here. Now this is pretty useless because this greeting variable has an access of pub, which means anyone can read from it. So this function doesn't really have any purpose. So we're just going to simplify the contract down to this. A greeting variable, and then when the contract is initialized, which is in this init function, when we click deploy, this only happens one time, it's going to initialize it to hello world. So this is a very simple smart contract that will sit out there on the local blockchain if we deploy this, okay? So we're going to deploy it. So when we click deploy, this ran, it's set greeting equal to hello world, and now this contract sits out there on the blockchain. And if we look at our console here, it says, okay, we deployed this contract to 0x01. NewbiesBot said, are you still at war with the playground? Yes, indeed I am. And I think the Flow team is redoing the playground. In fact, I saw designs for a totally different playground, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I am still very much at war with the stupid playground. But who knows? Maybe it's gotten better in the past month. So that is our contract. Now, in Cadence, things are unique in that the transaction layer and script layer are different than the contract. So if you're used to coding in Solidity, you'll know that all the transactions and smart contracts are sort of the same in that when you call a transaction, you're really just calling into the contract. That's different in Cadence, where the transaction is actually a separate piece of code that's also written in Cadence that calls into the smart contract and does things. So that's what a transaction is, and then a script simply reads from the blockchain. So again, scripts are separated from the contract. Of course, they may call into it, but they're sort of like a middleman in that they will, you'll have your Cadence code here to read information, and then maybe this will read into the smart contract. So that is a brief overview of what smart contracts, transactions, and scripts are, which I think is sort of what I'm talking about right here. Okay, so again, just to go over a little bit of syntax, public means this variable is public. Oh, and also for the record, if you're listening to this on YouTube or you're in Discord right now and you haven't taken our beginner cadence course, I would strongly recommend doing that. In this DAP bootcamp, we're not going to really explain to you all the nuances of cadence. In fact, you're really not going to learn that much about it. You're just going to learn what it is and sort of the very basics that you need to interact with it. If you really want to learn cadence and make some more complicated DAPs, I would definitely recommend checking out our beginner cadence course. It covers a lot of the stuff pretty well. So with that being said, I sort of covered what this means right now. The public means that this variable can be read by the public, but not changed by the public, so we're fine. We're going to change this to var, which just means that we can add a function down below called change greeting that is going to take in a new greeting, which is a string type. And inside this function, what it's going to do is set self.greeting equal to the new greeting. So this function is simply going to take in a new greeting and set self.greeting, which refers to the thing above it, so this variable right here, equal to the new greeting. Now, this isn't too important, but the reason I changed this from let was because if you have a variable called let, it's a constant. And if you've programmed before in things like JavaScript, you know the const variable, you can't change const variables, so I made it var. This is the name of the variable, and then this is the type. So this is how we declare variables in Cadence, and this is how we declare functions. Public fun instead of var. Okay, so very simple contract. Let's go ahead and deploy that. And this is what our contract is going to be for this bootcamp. So again, very simple. If you want to learn more, check out our Cadence course. But for now, that's going to be good. So what we want to do first is we want to read our greeting. So in order to do that, there's transactions which change, state on the blockchain, and then there's scripts which read state on the blockchain. So we of course want to use the script, and inside of our script, we first need to import our hello world contract from account one, and we're going to be returning a string type because that's what our greeting is. So inside our function, our main function, we're simply going to say, okay, return hello world.greeting, and that's all it is. So public function main, right? In your script, you always have a main function. We're returning a string type. That's what this means with a function. And then we're returning hello world.greeting. So of course, if we were to try to make this int, it wouldn't work because it says, wait a minute, hello world.greeting is a string, as we see right here, right? It's a string. We must return a string here. So if I click execute, it should execute the script, and sure enough, we see hello world inside of our console, and it's a string type. So that is because we initialized it to hello world right here. So the next step is, well, what if we wanted to change this greeting to a, something else? And that's where we get into day 2 here. Oh, also, yeah, this is a pretty helpful diagram if you want to learn the difference between transactions and scripts. So, you have the smart contract on the right in red, and this is sort of like your rule book that sits on the blockchain. And you have your person over here that wants to interact with it. So when this person wants to change data on the blockchain, they call a transaction. And the transaction is some Cadence code that modifies the blockchain, and the transaction calls into the smart contract. Whereas the script views the blockchain, right, in blue. The person, will call a script. The script will do its thing, maybe call into the smart contract and read some information from it and read the blockchain. So this is the difference between a transaction and script, and this is my lovely diagram to show that. Some other differences, I guess, scripts usually look like this, right? I just showed you that public function main, the return type, and you return something, whereas a transaction is usually more complicated. We'll get into this in a second, but the main idea here is that scripts view the blockchain, transactions modify the blockchain. Scripts can return something, transactions cannot. Transactions cost money, or we call it gas in the Web3 world. Although, truthfully, on Flow, gas is so small, it's like fractions of a penny, so it doesn't really matter, whereas scripts are free. So this is some, this is some basic stuff about scripts and transactions. So we already learned the script. Now we're going to learn a transaction. So let's open up this transaction tab, and you'll see a lot of it's actually set up for us, so we don't have to retype it. But what transactions look like is they usually look like this, where you import some contract. You don't have to. I'll show you what like a base level transaction would look like. So you have your transaction here. You open up these little curly brackets, and you have 2 stages. You have prepare and execute. We won't dive too much into prepare because this isn't a Cadence course, but basically what prepare does is it gives you access to the person that's signing the transaction. So for example, if account 1 is signing the transaction, we can log signer.address here, and that will log the address of the person signing the transaction. So in this case, it's don't know why that's 5. Okay, interesting. Oh, this is in hex, I think. But anyways, so I guess it's logging the person that's calling this. um, so yeah, and then also like the deeper you get into Cadence, you'll also learn that assets are stored inside of account storage. So what this is really doing is in the real world, if you want to withdraw NFTs or you want to manipulate state inside of a user account, the auth account allows you to do that right here. But for the sake of this bootcamp, we're going to completely ignore prepare, and we're going to stick in the execute phase, which just does some very basic modifications on the blockchain. So what we want to do is, because we want to change the greeting variable that exists in our contract, we want to call this change greeting function to do that. So let's go ahead inside of execute and say hello world dot change greeting. The new greeting is going to be hello newbiesbot or noobsybot. Boom. And then after this, we're going to log transaction is all done. Okay. And we should go ahead and import hello world, of course. All right. So if we call this from account 1, let's send it. We should get transaction is all done, right? So it called this function. So again, what this did is it called hello world.change greeting. It passed in hello noobsybot into new greeting. It went into this account, or it went to this contract. It passed in, hello noobsybot right here, and set our greeting equal to the new greeting. So if everything is successful, we should now run the script again and see that it says hello noobsybot, right? So it changed the greeting from hello world to this, right? And this is pretty much the extent of the Cadence knowledge we're going to need for our dApp. So if we scroll down a bit, we should be good. So I just went super quick. Oh, also one thing I forgot to mention. So, like realistically, we don't want this to be hard coded inside the transaction, because if we were to call this transaction from some sort of client, for example, our dApp, we want to be able to pass in the new greeting to the transaction instead of it just being hard coded, in this one line. So instead of putting this here, what we're going to put here is our, or like just our new greeting, and we're going to make a variable up here called our new greeting. That's a string. So because we put that in the argument of the transaction, now this playground is recognizing that we're passing in an argument. So we can simply type it in up here in this little box and put something else. Let's put like hello BZ, right? And if we put BZ, and if we send it, then if we go to our script again, it should be hello BZ. Right? So this is a lot more flexible because this transaction code is never going to change. It's always going to stay the same, whereas before we would have had to keep modifying this. So this transaction code is never going to change, but we can pass in new greetings to the transaction, and we're going to do that inside of our dApp. So does anyone have any questions in this so far? I know that everyone in this Discord, I think, has taken our Cadence course, if I'm not mistaken, except for Samip. So, and also Maddie 3323. But I'm gonna put a little thumbs up in the chat. How's everyone doing on this this Cadence part? I just went super quick, but I'm only covering very basic level Cadence stuff right now. I'm in the middle of Cadence. Oh, good. Okay, so this should be pretty recognizable to you then. I think you should be able to understand this then. And I think Maddie is also starting the course. I think Maddie, you're also in the Cadence course too, right? Like you're sort of going through it right now. So I think this shouldn't be too bad for you either. Oh, sweet. Okay, great. That is great news. That is great news. Also, I'm realizing now there's actually a slight typo in here. Let me change this live. So this actually no longer is just a Mac and Linux thing. Now it works on Windows too. So before this actually only worked on Mac and Linux, but it's now good on all platforms. Awesome. Okay. So yeah. Okay. So this is where in my opinion this is where the DApp course really gets interesting because this is this is where we start learning like actual like decentralized app development. So yeah. So let's just dive into it. Okay, so now the goal is, we did a lot of this testing on our local playground. We also have a DApp that we've been working on inside VS Code, but we want to connect these two, right? We want our DApp, which currently looks like this. Also, by the way, um, where you guys are at in the course, it doesn't look like this, right? Like you don't have this box here, all this stuff. We don't have to be the same part of the front end development, so don't worry about that. I This is basically the completed DApp. I just got rid of the decentralized parts. So don't worry if your DApp doesn't look like this yet. That's totally fine. I just am going through just the decentralized parts with you. Okay. Um, so anyway, the goal is to take our application, which looks like this, but has no decentralized or smart contracts hooked up to it, and we're gonna try and hook up our contracts on testnet. So we're gonna deploy this contract to testnet and then read that stuff from our DApp. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So let's walk through the course. So first of all, one thing that's really helpful, and I mean like really helpful, is if you install the Cadence VS Code extension. So when you're in VS Code, you want to click on these little four boxes here, like this grid. It's called extensions. And when you do that, you're going to look up Cadence. Now you're going to find this one, this little cat here. You want to install this in VS Code. It is incredibly useful, although truthfully, it's like extremely broken. But the one part of it that does work that we need to work is the syntax highlighting. So what this means is when you put Cadence code inside here as a CDC file, it will show you live compile errors. So let me show you how to do that. So yeah, so basically, make sure to install this. You can actually see that I already have it installed along with Svelte. So two best extensions out there. Um, Yeah, so then the next step is we want to install the Flow CLI. So if you go to this link, then you should be able to install the Flow CLI. So if you're on Mac, I would recommend just copy and pasting this line. If you're on Linux, I would copy and paste this line, and if you're on Windows, I would copy and paste this line. What I mean is you go to your terminal. Let me just clear this so it's easier to see. You go to your terminal, and you simply just take the line you need. I'm on a Windows, and just paste it in your terminal. I've already sort of done that, so I'm not going to do it again. And it succeeds if you type flow version, and it prints a version here. So if you copy and paste it and you type flow version and you don't get this, then something went wrong. But make sure you have some sort of like version here. And it's okay if your version is a little different, by the way. It's constantly changing. That's the Flow CLI. And also, what the Flow CLI is going to allow you to do is to deploy, run transactions in your terminal, really interact with the Flow blockchain on your terminal. That's what the Flow CLI is for. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make a folder inside of our VS Code project, and we're going to call it Flow. Let's call it Flow. We're also going to, what's the next step? Inside the Flow folder, let's make another folder called Cadence. So we're going to make a folder called Cadence. And then I believe it also wants us to create a couple folders in here, one for contracts, one for transactions, and one for scripts. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to copy our contract from the Flow Playground. We're going to copy this, and we're going to paste it into a hello world.cdc file. CDC is a Cadence extension. So let's go ahead and do that. We can save. Okay. So boom, there's our contract. Pretty awesome. Also, wait, did I do the flow init step yet? Okay, let me just make sure I didn't skip a step. Okay, I didn't yet. Okay, cool. So let's then take our transaction. We're going to bring that into our transactions thing, and we're going to call this change greeting. Actually, what did I call it in the course? Just to make sure I'm not straying. Yeah, change greeting .cdc. That's important. .cdc. Now, one quick note. Um, when you're outside of the Flow playground or when you're not on a local emulator anymore, logs don't do anything. So we're going to get rid of this log because that's only for testing purposes. So it's not going to do anything here. And also, of course, hello world, there's no such thing as OXO1 anymore. So we're going to use a local path instead. So, / contracts / hello world. That's TDC. So now we're pointing to this contract that lives here. And you'll notice we're not getting any compile errors right now, but that's because we haven't initialized our flow JSON, which we're going to do in a second here. So let's keep going, and we're going to call our script read greeting.cdc, and we're going to take our script and paste it in here. And similarly, we're going to get rid of the OXO1, and we're going to instead copy the local import path. Alrighty. So now we want to figure out how do we get actually like local errors inside of here. So the way to do that is you go to your terminal, and inside the directory of your DApp, you want to type flow init. So what this will do is it'll make a flow.json file inside your DApp code. And now what's really cool is I think yeah, so now let's see. I feel like I wrote this so weird. Why did I? Hold on. I feel like I wrote this so weird. But anyway, what you can do is if you actually restart your VS Code, let's restart it, and we go to our CDC files here. It should, if it works well, it should give us. No, it's not. Okay, I don't know why it's not. Maybe it's broken on Windows again. If it is, I'd be so annoyed. I swear it's a constant battle with Flow sometimes. I don't know why they broke that again. But anyways, the reason I'm sort of annoyed is because usually you'll get errors in here if your code isn't right, but I guess they broke it again, so something. Okay, so I guess we'll just go on. So the next step is to deploy our contract to testnet. So in order for our application to be able to read from a smart contract or interact with a smart contract, that smart contract needs to live out there in the public, or else there's nothing for us to read from. So what we should do is just follow the steps in this tutorial. So we want to configure our flow.json to have some things that we'll need. Okay, so what we can do is we want to make a contracts object under our network. So we're going to put a little contracts out. Also, this just doesn't look right to me. Hold on. I think maybe do I need to reinstall? Hold on one sec. Something is fishy to me here. Something doesn't seem right. I'm going to try and reinstall the Flow CLI. Or let me just try something really quick. I'm going to delete this. I'm going to try in a different terminal because maybe my PowerShell was outdated. Okay. No. All right, this is very strange. But I guess we can work with it. Maybe something changed in the time that I was doing this. But anyways, we can take our contracts object and paste it under our networks like this. What this is doing is simply listing all the contracts that are in our DApp. So under the contracts object, we put the name of the contract and we point to where that contract should be. So in this case, it's /flow cadence contracts hello world.cdc. So just like we have here. And this is our only contract, so we don't have to worry about we don't have to worry about putting any others. So the next step is to create an account because in order to deploy this contract, we need to create an account on testnet to do that, right? Contracts need to be deployed to an account. So let's go ahead and make an account to do that. So inside of our terminal, we can type, let me increase this a little bit. Flow keys generate network equals testnet, just like that. And this will generate some keys for us. I'm going to make this a little bigger. You can see we have a private key here. We also have a public key. The private key, of course, well, this on testnet, so it doesn't really matter. But, don't share that with people if you don't want them to mess with your stuff. And we can go to the flow testnet faucet, which will create an account for us with the keys that we just generated. So if we copy this public key here, why it did that. There's our public key, and we can go ahead, don't change any of the settings, and just click, let's click all the cactuses in a pot, I guess. I don't know. Okay. This was fun. And this will create our testnet account, right? Let's wait for that to happen. On. Yay! It created a testnet account for us. So it also gave us 1,000 flow tokens on testnet, which is pretty helpful for us. So now that we've created our account, we want to deploy our Hello World contract to our account on testnet. So in order to do that, we have to add some configurations. We need this testnet account thing under the accounts object. So under emulator account, we need to add testnet account. And the first thing we need to add here is your generated address. So your generated address is what we just created on the web. And your private key is what we have in our terminal here. Boom. Boom. Okay. So there's our private key. All is good. And the last thing we need to do is add this deployments object. So you go ahead and add that underneath accounts. We now have this deployments object. And what this will do is it says, okay, the deployments that we're going to do is on the network testnet. So we're doing this on testnet, not mainnet. And the account that we're going to deploy to is testnet account, which you'll notice is named here. If we had named this Jacob account, then we would put Jacob account here. Okay, but we call it testnet account. And the contract we're going to deploy is hello world, which the flow.json knows is coming from this directory because we've linked that right here. So again, it knows that hello world is coming from this file because we linked that right here. So if we go back to our terminal, we type flow project deploy network equals testnet. It's going to start deploying the hello world contract to our account. It's doing right now. All right, and it says it did successfully. So if we take this address, right, that's this address right here that we generated, we can actually go to the flow view source, go to testnet. Actually, I'll just show you what this looks like. So if you go to the flow view source, it's flowviewsource.com. You can click on testnet and paste your account address and click go, and it will take you to your account. So you can see we have 1,000 flow, and we also have a contract in it called Hello World, and so this now lives in the public testnet. They're pretty cool, right? We just deployed our first contract on testnet. There we go. Now this lives on testnet, and we can now interact with it, which is awesome. All right. So what I'm going to show you now is I'm going to show you how to interact with this contract in your terminal. Of course, the end goal is that we want our DApp to interact with it, but I'm going to show you how to easily interact with it on your terminal here, okay? So what you want to do is you want to run, and by the way, this is why we installed the Flow CLI. You want to type, well, both for deployment, key generation and this. So we're going to type flow scripts, execute. Now we have to put the path name. So /flow/cadence/scripts/read greeting. That's the path name to the script that we're going to run. That's CDC. And we're going to say this is on the network equals testnet. And if we run that, we should get hello world in the terminal. So you'll see that what just happened is this script is executed. And by the way, what's really cool about the flow.json is it knows. Actually, how does it know that? That's pretty funny. Wait, how does it know that? Wait, I'm actually I never really thought about this, but how does it know that this is that address? Is it because, oh, I think it's because of deployments, right? If I get rid of this, it's not going to know anymore. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. So what we have to do now, okay, so this is what just happened. So the question I was asking myself is, when we run this script, how does it know that hello world is being imported from this address, right? This testnet address. The way that it's doing that right now is because it knows that hello world was just deployed from testnet account, and it knows that testnet account has this address. So what it's doing when we run that is it's taking this and it's replacing this like that. It's just doing that replacement. But what you really should be doing is we should now that our hello world contract is deployed, what we should do is do this. So we change this a little bit to have a source, which is the file path, and then something called aliases. And in here you put a testnet alias and you put the address where it's deployed, just like that. So what this will happen now is even if we get rid of this deployments object, it should still work. Yeah, and it does. So once you deploy your contract, you want to change your contract to be an object that has a source, which is the file path, and then an aliases object, which has testnet, and then you can also put like mainnet here if you deploy it on mainnet. But yeah, I think there's also emulator for local emulator too, but that's a whole separate topic. Um, Cheetah says for lazy peeps like me, we can create basic flow app structure with flow app create project name. What do you mean by that, Cheetah? Uh, we can create basic flow app. I'm not sure what you mean. Is that a command in here? I think you mean something like this, right? Oh, I see. I see. I see. Oh, okay. Pretty cool. I didn't even know there was a thing. I'll try that after. That's pretty cool though. I'm assuming what that does. What does that do, cheated? Is that just like install a Next.js app with Flow.json hooked up? Like a little shortcut. Okay. So again, we were running. So we ran the script here, right? And it knows that this import is actually this address right here. So we're reading from that contract. And if we run this, we get hello world. Pretty cool. But now what we want to do is we want to run a transaction. So the way that you run a transaction is you say, okay, flow transactions send / flow cadence transactions change greeting, and we have to put what we want to change because remember we have to pass in an argument here, the new greeting. So let's pass in hello cheetah, right, in quotes. You put that in quotes, and then network equals testnet, and you also have to put signer equals testnet account. So with transactions, remember you have to sign from somebody. So in this case, we're going to sign from testnet account. Since we already have the private key, we can easily sign with this account. So if we send this, it's going to wait for the transaction to go through. Got it, Cheetah. That makes sense. And it looks like, did it go through? Yep, it's sealed. And I don't see any errors here. So if we go back and we run our script again, we get hello cheetah, right? So we just changed that on the blockchain, which is really awesome, isn't it? Um, there you go. And remember, with transactions, you have to have a signer because you have to have someone that's changing the data, but that's responsible for that transaction. Okay. Um, there you go. So I believe, yeah, I believe that's it for chapter 3. So Speedy Gonzalez, we just sped through that. All right. So I think that's all we're gonna do for today. Does anyone have any questions on that so far? Put a little thumbs up in the chat. If you're all right, thumbs it up. If you're not doing well, thumbs it down. The main point of today was to deploy our contract to testnet and interact with it on our local terminal here on next Monday. So wow, our next workshop is going to be on Monday. On Monday, our goal is going to be to actually hook up this stuff to our DApp. So we're going to be calling transactions and scripts from our front end. And for example, when you click like for example, when you where is it? Like when you click a button, it's gonna like call a transaction, and this is gonna be read from the script. So we're gonna connect this to our DApp on Monday. Alrighty. I'm also gonna make the float. We covered, yeah. And here's the float. Very welcome, Maddie. Thanks for joining. Thanks for boosting as well. All right, so here is the workshop float. The code is Cadence. That's for attending today's workshop.